Our talks have been from Byzantium, but we're going to close with a very powerful answer to that from Dr. Klaus-Peter Haus-Long, the director of the Islamic Museum in Berlin, which, like the Byzantine Museum that Gabriel Mitka is at, are sources of the beginning of the studies of our concepts in the Western world of both Byzantium and Islam and what they were and how they interact. And one of the aspects of the Islamic Museum since the beginning of the 20th century has been the great palace at Mashhad, outside actually at the airport in Amman, Jordan, near many of the mosaics that Professor Schick has shown and that Gabrielle Mitka herself talked about. So let us welcome Professor Haus.
Thank you very much indeed. I admire you that you are still alive after a long afternoon of intensive researches. First, my sincere thanks to Helen Evans for the invitation and for her staff to really bring me here into a venerable place. And my congratulations also to the timing of the exhibition. I think when you started considering it, you had not dreamt of Arabellion taking place in many countries of the Near East, and perhaps you may even have given some incentive to these happenings. The social life, after the many talks, and especially the last talk, the social life in the Islamic countries may sound to you as rather comfortable, and one should look more and more, this is for decades what I also taught, one should look more and more into the integration of the communities in the Near East and otherwhere. But if you look into the last news, this seems to be somehow in a difficult development at the moment. The historical setting may have been rather comfortable for many, but it seems that this is seriously endangered now. Looking back into history, I don't want to spit into the soup of integration, which is always necessary to be cooked, but I fear that my contribution will be in a way rather speculative, but asking for caution in interpreting iconologies, where we don't have any texts of iconography really telling us this is, by inscription, Theodoros, and this is the donor, Lady so-and-so. If we don't have these texts, our speculations, of course, run into the ways where we know what we are seeing, a vine and something like that. But is it really what we are seeing? This is somehow questionable if one sees the context. Our question is how the contacts, especially between former politically leading circles of Christians under Byzantine rule, with the new Islamic authorities and with the Caliph, for example, had looked like in the early Islamic period. And I want to discuss how one could expect the early Islamic authorities to have made use of propaganda means for attracting the Christian population in the arts, for example, or whether we need to look for a sheer Islamic self-representation and its attraction for the other communities in itself. The change from the Byzantine era in the Near East to Islamic rule meant an epochal shift in every respect, in political, social, spiritual, and also economical life, which must have taken place in rather quick steps. Everyday life continued, as we have seen with many examples from the churches, the monasteries, dated into the Islamic period of Syria, Jordan, and the Fertile Crescent. And archaeologists have an awful time to differentiate between Byzantine and Umayyad levels. Harold Mayer, a wonderful archaeologist, used to talk of Byzum ceramics, Byzantine, Umayyad ceramics. This is a fabulous and very helpful term. The first decades after this rash Arab conquest brought a mixed administration for the intelligentsia and the real ones. And this was situated between the ruling class of the Medinan and Meccan aristocracy and the local sedentary population, as well as with the Arab tribal society. It consisted of Greek as well as Arabic-speaking and writing administrators, secretaries they are called mostly, and also, for example, the mint officials who promoted Byzantine gold mint design with figures of the Greek emperors like Heraclius and his heirs, and later of the figures of the caliphs in the same attitude, or in Iran with the Sasanian silver coins, in the old Sasanian motifs with additional Arabic inscriptions. There were many Arab Monophysite Christians in the service of caliphs. Johannes Chrysostomus, who was just named by one of his names, and you mentioned that he had several others, may have been one of the, not to say secretaries, but of the near entourage of the caliph of his period. And also scholars with training in Christian theology and classical studies have surely somehow fostered the beginning and development of Islamic dogma and of the Islamic new value system, which was formulated and defined in opposition to the former theology. A marked shift happened in the reign of the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik around 692 to 695, when the Caliphate administration, the tax registration, and several other things were changed completely from Greek and Arabic into pure, wholly Arabic. And when a mint reform brought about the shape of purely Arabic coins and dirhams and dinars, in the shape with inscriptions only we know for several centuries then. We believe that these events have until now not been taken seriously enough for the interpretation of the architectural forms in early Islamic art. A certain range of important early Islamic monuments in the region of the Fertile Crescent have in art history been labeled as Byzantine forms under Arabic caliphal patronage. Most famous, the Dome of the Rock, which in the Middle Ages served as, among other, the form or the model of the Temple of Salomon as a church in the Crusader kingdom, and in early Renaissance art history as a curious monument. In early art as a curious monument, and in early art history as a monument built by Byzantine craftsmen with allusion to victory monuments and mausolea of the Byzantine era. It served, of course, as a proof for the incapability of Arabs in building and designing important monuments for their new religion of their own, except in the decrepit, imperfect cube of the Kaaba. But this would not be really in line with the invention of new architectural forms like the mosque and other architecture erected in the Fertile Crescent region. One observation is necessary. There was in the Byzantine province of Syria and Palestina not really spectacular imperial architecture, perhaps except for the pilgrim center of Qalat Sim'an, a Justinianian foundation, and for the famous cathedral of Antiochia, which was in ruins at that period already, and some minor copies of it. A real monumental imperial Byzantine architecture did not exist until the Islamic conquest, and it was the new rule which enabled great architecture in the region. We'll come back to that. A fresh wind of interpretation of the art history came with the studies of, for example, Robert Schick on the Christian culture under Islamic rule, and recently by Garth Foden, who has collected the material evidence for Hellenistic, Christian, and other pre-Islamic traditions and instigations under and with the Umayyads. Foden's formulation, especially with respect to the images and stucco sculptures, which were studied and became more and more known from Umayyad representations, for example, the paintings of the caliphs in Qusay Amra and Qasr Khair al-Gharbi palaces. His interpretation is that the obvious allusions of the depictions of a ruler to Sasanian as well as Byzantine ceremonial must have been chosen in order to address the old population, not only the Muslim Arabs, but perhaps the newly converted or those who should become converted, and to make the new culture somehow attractive for them. This is a very interesting formulation which will be of help for the interpretation or our look at the Meshatta facade. I would like to emphasize the slight reserve that the impetus of the new system dwindles away the more we interpret old interpretations of the Christian pre-Islamic traditions into the motives, and the enormous strength in the development and the formulation of the new Islamic religious and secular values would be somehow shaded or would remain hidden behind the forces of the older traditions. Therefore, at the end, I will present you with a speculation, and this is a fine organization of Helen's that she poses this paper in diagonal to Robert Schick's presentation, who was very careful to avoid speculations. I will, at my age, I'm allowed to dare and speculate. So I would formulate that I see the Umayyad period as an epoch of experiments in several fields and also in the representative arts, a synthesis from old traditions and very quick new solutions. New buildings, new architectural features in mosques were partly covered by ornaments in traditional techniques and motives, like here in the Dome of the Rock with the fabulous mosaic plates coming, of course, as spolia from other buildings, but rearranged in a wonderful fashion and with additions which apparently have been carved new for the occasion. I will not speculate on the vine and the pearls. We have heard about that. Avinoam Shalem has done a fabulous study on the Yatima pearl, Barry Flood on the wine scroll in the Umayyad Mosque of Damascus. But I would like to dwell on the motive of or the signum, I would say, of the arcades, which could help us to follow a possible scheme of reinterpretation and re-evaluation of messages. These are frames. You see the little arcades as framing certain motives, and the representative structure of a field of programmatic importance framed by a Hellenistic architectural feature will reappear throughout the early Islamic period. And you have a wonderful example here in the new Islamic presentation in the wooden plate there. This sort of architecture was, of course, well, this is coming in between. It's the same mosaic which we have just seen a few minutes ago from the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, representing architecture of apparently buildings, villages, or cities, and water flowing, which, of course, remains until now rather enigmatic if you don't believe the interpretation as a paradisical